All right, welcome back to A Jeweler's Life. Today we got our pinkies up because we're talking about none other than my favorite gemstone, the fancy sapphire. All right, so let's talk about sapphires. Like I said, they're my favorite gemstone. Blue is my favorite color. I wish I was born in September so that sapphires could be my birthstone. So sapphires have a very interesting chemical composition. Sapphires belong to the corundum family. And in corundum, there's a couple other gemstones that belong to that family. A big one is ruby. So sapphires and corundum, but specifically sapphires, are comprised of or made up, their chemical makeup is of aluminum oxide. So the blue color that you see in a sapphire comes from trace elements of iron and titanium within the sapphire itself. All right, let's get into color variations because although my favorite color is blue, and when you think sapphires, we think of blue, there's a lot more color of sapphires out there. So sapphires vary in a bunch of different colors. There's yellow, there's pink, there's purple, there's yellow, if I didn't say that already. There's green, and there are even some that are just completely colorless, and we call those white sapphires. So whenever we're discussing the difference between the main color of a sapphire being the blue sapphire and all the other colors, we consider them fancy sapphires or fancy color sapphires. So as jewelers, we love working on sapphires because on the Mohs hardness scale, they're at a 9, which is pretty high if you look at that scale. And so we're not worried about breaking them or them cracking while we're setting them. The nice thing about sapphires is you can wear them in your jewelry every day. You can wear them for a very long time. They're very durable. They're just good for everyday wear. So sapphires are found literally all over the world. Funny enough, even here in South Carolina, if we go up to our northern border of North Carolina, you can find some sapphires there. There's some sapphires in Arkansas. There's a few states within the U.S. that actually have sapphire deposits in them, but those typically aren't the greatest quality. What we're looking for is more overseas. And when I say overseas, I mean Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Australia, Madagascar, but most famously and above all, India. And I say that because the Cashmere Sapphire comes from India. And so the Cashmere Sapphire is very interesting. It's pretty cool. And I think that maybe a lot of people maybe overlook this or just don't know that this even exists because the Cashmere mines closed so long ago. I think it was like the 80s when they closed. They closed just like the Argyle mines because of depletion of resources. And so within these Cashmere mines, the most beautiful sapphires in the entire world came out of there. Essentially, they had the greatest rough, which for those of you that don't know what rough is, the original stone, which you get out of the ground, is considered rough, whether it's diamond rough, sapphire rough, emerald rough. We call it rough because it's rough and because it's pretty ugly when it comes out. You just see this very opaque thing that then we put in a machine called a serene, which is a laser that allows us to know to figure out what's the best proportion and how many stones we can get out of that rough stone. But I digress. So the Cashmere Sapphires, going back to that, it's pretty cool. If you look them up online, it's amazing. So you'll see the quality. You'll see whenever you think of royal gems, if you think of like Queen Victoria wearing a giant sapphire pendant or having a sapphire on her crown, it's usually a Cashmere Sapphire. So Cashmere Sapphires, if you go and look online, I think probably the least expensive one that you're gonna find is probably $120,000, and they go up to millions of dollars per carat, which is amazing. We actually had a client earlier this year that needed one, so that was pretty fun getting one of those in and taking a look at, an $800,000 sapphire that somebody wanted to put in an engagement ring. Lucky girl. So the next kind of sapphire that we're going to talk about are star sapphires. Star sapphires, I kind of like to say that there are certain things, certain pieces of jewelry or designs or colors that people either love them or hate them, and this is one of those. So the star sapphire, typically it's cut in a cabochon shape, which is kind of like a dome. And so in the middle of that dome, you see a star, just kind of like if you look up at the night sky, or and it's not like a star like what you draw in school or see in a drawing or anything like that. It's more of the reflection that an actual star gives. And so that reflection or that projection that the sapphire gives is called asterism. So what that asterism does is that it creates that pattern on the surface of the gem, and that's why they're called star sapphires. Let's go over cut and clarity. Just like we know with all of our gems, for the most part, we go by the 4 C's, and cut and clarity are included in those 4 C's. And so whenever you're shopping for a sapphire or looking at one, cut and clarity have a lot to do with that. Typically with gemstones, rather than having like VS1, VS2, VS or VVS and all of that like diamonds do, typically we're looking for eye clean or not eye clean, and that gives us a good difference between the inclusions or the amount of inclusions that a gemstone may have. Now you'll also hear this phrase kind of thrown around, which is AAA, AA, single A, and B. So B is considered commercial quality, and then you go A, AA, and AAA. AAA being the absolutely nicest. But again, with gemstones, the grading standards aren't as standardized as they are with diamonds. Let's go over a couple of really famous sapphires. So one that I think almost everybody has heard of is the Star of India. And so the Star of India is a 563 carat star sapphire that's actually in the Museum of Natural History up in New York City. It is obviously from India, and it is massive. I mean, it is huge. Don't think anybody's going to be putting that on a ring anytime soon. And then there is another one that's also super, super famous, and that is the Logan Sapphire. And that is actually in the Smithsonian, and it is 423 carats. And as you can see on the screen, it is absolutely stunning. Enjoy that video. It's great if you get the opportunity to go to the Smithsonian and see it in person. It truly is breathtaking. And now let's talk about the synthetic counterparts of our natural sapphires, and those are lab-grown sapphires. So with lab-grown sapphires, just kind of like with rubies, there is what's considered synthetic and lab-grown. So synthetic sapphires are just blue plastic, essentially. It's still seen in jewelry, not high-end jewelry, but hey, everybody's got a budget, and if that's what it is and you want something blue, that's the way to go. Just keep in mind, they do not hold up well over time, and they're very brittle. They break very easy. As jewelers, we get a little upset when we have to work with those because they end up cracking usually, and we have to have some extra ones laying around. The other one is the lab-grown sapphire. With lab-grown sapphire, because it is natural material, essentially just like lab-grown diamonds, we take a seedling and we spin it in a chamber to make this larger sapphire. And so it's got the same exact properties as a natural sapphire does. So it is very durable and very resistant. If anything, sometimes it's a little bit more resistant to certain chemicals than natural sapphires are. All right, and last but not least, let's talk a little bit about the historical significance of sapphires. And if you guys can imagine royal blue, whenever we put anything royal and we think about that color, it's from the sapphire that it originates. Sapphires have been around and have been a symbol of royalty for thousands of years, and I'm sure will continue to, which again is why it's my favorite. I love blue and I love sapphires. We've got great selection here in store, and if you're ever looking for one, just hit us up. Thank you guys for tuning in, and look out for our next video.